Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. The phone vibrated against a stack of blueprints, humming a low, irritating tune. 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday of all times. Mr. Thorne. It was Leo, a kid I'd hired to run the front desk at the Obsidian, a boutique spot I'd finished last year. He sounded like he'd seen a ghost. I'm sorry to call you on a job site, Elias. I think I'm looking at something you'd want to know. I was standing in a gutted lobby 3 towns over, sweat stinging my eyes, my boots caked in gray drywall dust. To everyone here, I was just the guy with the level and the bad coffee. Leo, I'm neck deep in a plumbing crisis. Can this wait? No, he whispered. The woman in the photo on your desk? The one from your anniversary trip? She just checked into 402. She's with a man, Elias, and they didn't look like they were here for a business meeting. The noise of the construction site, the rhythmic thud of hammers, the whine of the saws, suddenly felt miles away, replaced by a dull, throbbing silence in my ears. She's supposed to be at a conference in Seattle, Leo. You're mistaken. I wish I was. They're under a corporate name. Vance Holdings. Vance. My heart didn't break. It turned into a cold stone in my chest. Marcus Vance was my operations lead. My right hand. The man who wore the Italian suits so I could keep wearing my work shirts. See, I'd built an empire on a lie of humility. My wife, Elena, thought I was a consultant, a glorified contractor who made a decent living but lived paycheck to paycheck. I kept the millions hidden in LLCs and holding companies because I'd been burned before. I wanted to be loved for the dirt under my fingernails, not the zeros in my bank account. I climbed into my truck, the smell of old upholstery and sawdust filling the cab. I pulled out my laptop and logged into the hotel's back-end server. I didn't need a spy. I owned the cameras. I owned the software that tracked every keycard swipe and every bottle of water taken from the minibar. I pulled up the lobby feed from 20 minutes ago. There she was. Elena. She looked beautiful, radiant, even. She was wearing a silk dress I'd never seen, laughing as Marcus leaned in to kiss her neck while they waited for the elevator. It was a casual, practiced intimacy. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a lifestyle. I sat there for a long time, watching the empty hallway on the screen. My hands were shaking, but my head was starting to clear. I'm a builder. I know that when a structure is compromised by rot, you don't try to paint over it. You find the source. You expose it to the air. And then you tear it down to the studs. Leo, I said, my voice finally steady. Do me a favor. Treat them like VIPs. Send up the expensive champagne. Charge it to the Vance corporate account. And then, go home early. I'm taking over the digital management for 402 tonight. I didn't go home to our quiet apartment. I went to a small, private office I kept above a garage across town. I spent the next few hours digging. It turned out Marcus hadn't just been taking my wife. He'd been treating my company like his personal piggy bank. 5-star dinners, luxury car rentals, client gifts that ended up in Elena's closet. He was using my sweat and my secrets to buy her the life she thought I was too small to provide. By midnight, I saw the lights go out in 402 on my dashboard. I leaned back, the blue light of the monitor reflecting in my eyes. I wasn't going to storm in there and cause a scene. That's what a desperate man does. I was going to remind them whose house they were sleeping in. I hovered my mouse over the climate control for the 4th floor. I turned their AC off and kicked the boiler into overdrive. Then, I set a timer for the localized system test on their room's smoke alarm. I wanted them to have a very, very long night. I watched them through the digital eye of the hallway camera. By 2 a.m., the heat in room 402 had become a physical weight. The door cracked open, and Marcus stepped out in his boxers, wiping sweat from his forehead, looking for a thermostat that didn't exist anymore. I waited until he retreated inside. Then I tripped the localized fire alarm. It wasn't the loud, building-wide siren, just a sharp, persistent chirp-chirp-chirp inside their 4 walls. I watched the feed as they scrambled, panicked and half-dressed, thinking there was a real fire. They stood in the hallway for 20 minutes, shivering in the drafty corridor, until I reset the system from my laptop. I did it 3 more times before dawn. By 6 a.m., they looked like they'd aged a decade. They checked out at sunrise, Marcus snapping at the morning clerk about substandard conditions, and Elena looking hollowed out by exhaustion. I didn't follow them. I went to my real office, the one downtown that Marcus thought was his. When Marcus walked in at 9 a.m., he was wearing a fresh suit, but his eyes were bloodshot. He didn't see me sitting in his chair until he was halfway across the room. Elias! He stopped dead, his coffee splashing over the rim of the cup. What are you doing here? I thought you were at the Riverside site. The Riverside site has a solid foundation, Marcus, I said, spinning a heavy gold fountain pen between my fingers. Unlike this company, or your career. I slid a thick manila folder across the mahogany desk. It wasn't just photos. It was a forensic audit. $47,000, I said quietly. That's what you've skimmed from the maintenance fund over the last 8 months. Dinner at the Blue Room, that silk dress Elena wore last night, the business trip to my own hotel in Bend. You were very efficient at spending my money to entertain my wife. Marcus went a sickly shade of gray. Elias, look, I can explain. You can't, I interrupted. Clause 12 of your equity agreement. Any moral turpitude or misappropriation of funds results in an immediate forfeiture of your shares. You aren't just fired, Marcus. You're broke. Security is waiting at your desk with a cardboard box. You have 5 minutes. He tried to say something, but the words died in his throat. He realized then that the simple contractor he'd been mocking was actually the man who held his entire life in a closed fist. He turned and walked out, his shoulders slumped, the Italian suit suddenly looking 3 sizes too big. Then I went home. Elena was in the kitchen, nursing a cup of tea. She looked up, startled. You're home early. I thought you had a late shift. I didn't say a word. I just set the divorce papers on the marble island. She looked at them, then at me. Her face went pale, but she tried to play the part. Elias, what is this? Is this some kind of joke about the money? I told you we need more stability. I'm not small, Elena, I said, the words tasting like ash. I just wanted to see if you'd stay if I was. You didn't. Marcus? He told me you were struggling, she whispered, her voice trembling. He said the business was failing, that you were hiding the debt from me. Marcus was a liar, but you chose to believe the lie because it gave you an excuse. I tapped the papers. I own the Obsidian. I own the warehouse. I own the 6 properties you've been calling unstable for years. You're getting the apartment and your car. That's it. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She saw the blueprints on the counter. Not for a small renovation, but for the $40 million empire I'd built while she was looking for a way out. You own all of them? She breathed, the horror of what she'd thrown away finally sinking in. The hotel last night. The alarms? The heat. That was you? I'm a builder, Elena, I said, heading for the door with my bag. I know how to fix things, but I also know when a structure is beyond repair. 6 months later, I was back at a new site in Ashland. My boots were dirty, my hands were calloused, and the sun was hot on my neck. The new front desk manager, a sharp woman who didn't know my name yet, walked out to the parking lot. Excuse me, sir? The owner is supposed to be doing a walkthrough today. Have you seen him? I wiped the sweat from my brow and smiled, feeling the weight of the master key in my pocket. Not yet, I said, but I hear he likes to stay under the radar. I picked up my level and got back to work. Because that's the thing about rebuilding, you have to make sure the foundation is honest this time. 2 years later, the dust had finally settled. Not just on the construction sites, but in my head. I was standing on the balcony of my 10th property, a converted 1920s theater in the heart of Seattle. It was raining, that fine, misty gray that makes the city look like a charcoal drawing. I wasn't wearing work boots today. I was wearing a coat that fit, holding a glass of scotch, watching the city breathe. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the automated guest registry at the Obsidian, my flagship. Guest check-in, room 104, economy. Name, Vance, Marcus. I stared at the screen for a long time. I could have blocked it. I could have had the manager lose the reservation or trigger the fire alarms just for old time's sake. The systems were still mine. The power was still there, sitting right under my thumb. But as I looked out at the skyline I helped build, I realized the anger didn't have a pulse anymore. I pulled up the lobby camera. Marcus looked smaller. His hair was thinner and the suit, the one that used to be so sharp, looked tired, like it had been dry cleaned one too many times. He was carrying his own bags. No assistance, no corporate black card. Just a man checking into a budget room in a building he used to think he ran. Then the door opened behind him. It was Elena. She wasn't wearing silk. She was wearing a raincoat and a look of quiet, exhausted frustration. They weren't holding hands. They weren't laughing. They were arguing over a parking receipt. They were living the small life she had been so afraid of. I realized then that I didn't need to do anything. I didn't need to haunt them. The world was doing it for me. They had traded a foundation of gold for a house of cards, and they were still living in the wreckage of the choices they'd made. I closed the app. I didn't delete it. I just moved it to the last page of my phone. A few minutes later, my site foreman, a kid named Gabe who reminded me of myself 15 years ago, walked onto the balcony. Elias? The inspectors signed off on the ballroom. We're ahead of schedule. You want to head down and see the finish? I looked at the empty glass in my hand, then back at the door. In a minute, Gabe, I said. I want to check the light in the lobby first. I walked through my hotel, nodding to the staff who knew me now. Not as a ghost, but as the guy who actually cared if the hinges squeaked. I passed Marcus and Elena in the hallway near the elevators. I didn't pull my hat down. I didn't look away. I walked right past them. Elena stopped. I felt her gaze hit the back of my neck. I heard her intake of breath, that sharp, sudden realization. "Elias?" she whispered, her voice cracking. I kept walking. I didn't turn around. Not because I was angry, but because I was finished. I had spent my life building walls to keep people out or secrets in. But as I stepped out into the Seattle rain, I felt light. I wasn't a secret mogul and I wasn't a fake contractor. I was just a man who knew exactly what his life was worth. I hailed a cab, caught my reflection in the window, and smiled. The renovation was finally complete. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. See you next time.